I just want to talk briefly and practically about my engagement with the piece as a director. When I got the invitation from Jonathan Ricci to come and stage the piece here, which I think was maybe even 3 years ago now, I'd never heard it. I had heard of it because I'd read about Britten and know about him, having worked here before, but I hadn't heard it. And Jonathan said a very specific thing. It's going to be 2014. The whole year is going to be crowded and clouded by the commemoration of the beginning of the slaughter of 1914 to 18. And if we're going to do it at Aldeburgh, and we should do it, we feel we've missed it out, we should do it, then we should do it in 2014, because that would be the right context for the piece. So that was the frame of mind in which I first listened to it, and was immediately smitten by its vividness, its extraordinary violence. People talk about it as a piece being about pacifism. It seems to me it's about violence, which is not quite the same thing. And it's an incredibly violent experience. And I was just struck, I'm a theatre director, it goes like a train as a plot. Then I found out everyone agrees that it doesn't work. And if I had £10 for everyone who had said, Owen Wingrave doesn't really work, I wouldn't need my fee. To most of those people, I say, so tell me, which production have you seen? And they say, well, I haven't actually seen it. So some things that I thought about it before I began, or that I've discovered as I've worked on it. As I said, it always gets described, because people want to categorize things. It's called the pacifist opera. It's unique among the operas in having that designation. We don't call The Rape of Lucretia the rape opera. We don't call Peter Grimes the fishing opera. Why is it given this label? And why has that label become the albatross around its neck? Well, I think there are two reasons for that. If you're a theatre management and you have the option of, shall we do The Turn of the Screw or shall we do Owen Wingrave, you're always going to do The Turn of the Screw. The Turn of the Screw has the rare distinction of being a copper-bottomed, actor-proof, audience-proof masterpiece, a status it shares, in my opinion, probably only with Twelfth Night and The Importance of Being Earnest. You can't screw it up. It is perfect. It's also well-known and much loved, so you're always going to produce that and not the piece with the dodgy reputation. It's also the case certainly in 1970-71 when the piece hit the boards, and I think certainly now. If you take the opera audience, which with your good selves accepted tends to be amongst the most conservative of all cultural bodies, why on earth would they want to enjoy or approve of a work of art which explicitly, in the year of its premiere, aligned itself with a group of people who were about as popular in 1970 as the miners were in 1984. You have to remember that in 1968, when Britten started work on Owen Wingrave, to be on the side of peace was to be aligned with Vanessa Redgrave and the people who were fighting the police in Grosvenor Square outside the American embassy. It was an unpleasant, antisocial attitude to take. And it is quite simply the fact that people say the pacifist opera, what they mean is it dares to have political content. That's why it isn't a popular piece. I think that's a complete red herring. As I say, I don't think it's about pacifism any more than Albert Herring is about village fates. it's not just about the roots of violence, it's also about the experience of violence. It immerses you in what it is like to be deformed by violence. All of the characters in the opera are bullies. They are immensely violent people. Their vocal lines are tortured, their vocabulary is tortured. Everyone in the opera, with the exception of Lechmere, whose backstory we don't know, is in a state of unresolved mourning for someone they have lost in military conflict. And the music itself, from the very first bar, immerses you in violence. Owen himself is the most violent character in the opera. Owen does nothing but either struggle to stop himself losing his temper or lose his temper. He is terrified not of becoming the boy in the painting, but of becoming the bully in the painting. He knows a great truth, which Britten also understood: put a uniform on any man and he is capable of violence. That's what uniforms are for. And that's why Owen tells Mr. Coyle, "Sir, I can't go through with it." As you can tell, the reason why I did this opera is because immediately I felt hugely in sympathy with the intellectual, political, but most of all the emotional world that it inhabits. I've discovered on rehearsing it that the thing people often very unpleasantly talk about as being the thing they don't like about the opera is its greatest strength. The extraordinary degree to which Britten doesn't flinch from creating unsympathetic characters. I love unsympathetic characters, and so do actors. We don't come to the theatre to see nice people. And in particular, the misogynist accusation that the women in the opera aren't really to be borne because they're not very nice, because we all know that women, their function in life is to be nice. They are in fact extraordinary, accurate and penetrating portraits of three highly individual women, all in their different ways, trying to carry the burden of the dead. They are all in their different ways trapped within the value system that Paramore represents. And the extraordinary energy of those three women, it's a deformed energy, a violent energy, a traumatized energy, but I've had the good fortune to work on those parts with some really great singing actresses, and I can tell you Britten knew exactly what he was doing, both not only why he was creating those portraits, but also the musical detail of how he creates them. Things I discovered when I was directing it, some particular things, that as so often, the things which people tell you or that you sense immediately will be the greatest problems in staging any particular text, turn out to be the solutions. So problem number one with Owen Wingrave, how do you bring on stage the opera's leading character, which is a house? Answer, you don't. It's there in the music. You give the audience a space and you make it very clear to them, ladies and gentlemen, fill that space with this music. There you are, there's Paramore. Do not spend any money building big staircases. It won't help. Problem number two, the plot of the opera hinges on a set of portraits. Forgive me if I stick my neck out. I never want to see a work of art on stage. Statues and paintings on stage, they always look naff. The props department may have a huge budget, they may break their backs. Statues, occasionally you can get away with it, but pictures on stage, you always look at it and you go, yeah, that was done by the props department. How to get round that essential dramatic toe stubber. Well, the first decision that I took was that there would be no portraits. Again, we would invite the audience to use their imagination, or specifically to use Britten's imagination. He paints each one of those portraits in the first 2 pages of the score. They're there. Next problem, how do you get over the periodness of the piece? There is a great danger, put anything in late 19th century costumes, and the great curtain of Downton Abbey descends, and everyone goes, isn't it marvellous? Look at the gloves, look at the hair, look at all that. You know, this is an urgent work of art. How do you get the Victorianness of it? Well, I did it instinctively by having the ghosts of the opera, the dead people in the opera, in contemporary dress, because the piece is a very modern work of art. It's full of the energies and the ideas and the immediate context of the time in which it was written, 1968, when the Vietnam War is reaching its terrible tipping point, and war was on television screens every night. As you may have noticed, ladies and gentlemen, we're still right there. It's been a very extraordinary thing to go in each day, particularly in this week of the opening performances, turning off the radio, which is describing what's happening in Iraq, and getting in the car and going to Snape. So it was very easy to say the dead should not be the dead of Owen's distant past, but should be the dead of Owen's future. If Owen's mission was to stop war, he failed. And that's why we're still fighting war, and that's why the dead, the ghosts of my production, are in modern dress. The biggest challenge in staging the piece is the denouement, the locked room. It's kind of a director's nightmare. So you work all evening to set up a situation in which the leading character goes into a locked room, and then there's a bit of an interlude, and then someone unlocks the room and he's dead inside it, and just think about it. How would you do it? Where's the room? It can only be in that wing, in which case the opera ends with a bunch of people going, oh, he's dead, he's dead. Not going to work. Ditto stage right, not going to work. Even worse, you could have the door to the room up there. That would be really great, and imagine the look on Mark and the singers' faces where I say, I thought it would be really great if the final ensemble, you're all facing upstage. So the whole design, the whole mise en scène of the staging started with the proposition that the locked room would be in the middle of the room, and that the construction of the room would happen in front of the audience's eyes, and that we would trust that essential image, which I think is often at the heart of all of Britten's plots. An act of violence, normally between an adult man and a teenaged boy, but sometimes between a man and a woman. An act of violence that you don't see, that's hidden. And Wingrave gives that motif its most perfect form, I think. It's right there in the middle of the stage. Owen's death happens while you're watching the opera, but you don't see it. You don't hear it. And what ought to be an impossibility of staging turns out to be the clue. So from that idea that the room had to be in the middle of the theatre room, okay, so I was going to build it in front of the audience eyes. What do you need for a room? You need 4 walls. Okay, hey presto, 4 movable walls, and with them I can create all the locations that the opera requires. The question of the ending, and indeed what constitutes the plot of Owen Wingrave. Because on paper, it's an impossible plot to animate. It starts off, one person says no, someone else says yes. Scene 2, no, no, yes, yes, yes. Scene 3, no, yes, 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 no. And so it goes on. He says the same thing to Kate in his last line as he says to Mr. Coyle in his first line. Nothing happens in this opera. The action of the opera is entirely interior. It expounds a single situation. As it turns out, that's a fantastic piece of plotting. It means that what the opera does is takes you, the only journey it can take is inside. There is no external action. No one goes anywhere, no one does anything. All people do is talk. So the only journey is interior. It's the same as Electra, another really good plot. Almost nothing happens. It's all inside. It's a single situation. A bunch of people, they're locked in one place. They're going to shout at each other until someone dies. What ought to be a weakness of plotting, a lack of incident, turns out to be the opera's greatest strength. There we go. Those are the things that I wanted to share with you. Because